good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you tune in. I'm your local shaman, Lady Lighthouse, and welcome to the Light Network. On today's episode of Saved by the Light, I just finished up reading chapters 6, 7, and 8. Coming on to talk. Off the cuff, no prep work other than the fact that I made a few notes on where I put some highlights. But we're just going to talk about those few chapters. So, again, if you're just kind of tuning in, this is I I'm reading the book Saved by the Light, and it's a story about Dannion Brinkley, who is a person who was struck by lightning. Yeah, so like I said, I'm picking up on chapter 6 here. So kind of what the brief recap of what's happened thus far is um he was struck by lightning. He left his body. Everyone thought he was dead, and he went into the light, had his life review, and met 13 beings of light and was shown the future, as well as kind of his mission on Earth. So that's kind of where we're picking up. Hold on, I'm pulling back up. Chapter 6. Okay. So, the story has me emotional. um, but in a very good way, like in a very, very moving way. And I think I'm actually going to start near the back. I went to chapter 6, but I'm actually one of the things that's really standing out to me was the very last quote. He said, "If someone had told me about a near-death experience before I had my own, I would have made fun of them. Now I am one." And I just I don't know. I read that and I was like, I relate so deeply to that sentiment because I mean, I know I grew up very logical minded, very engineering science minded, very distrusting, not believing in the spirit realm. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. You're crazy. And had someone said something about like some of the things that I'm saying now, you know, many years ago, I too would have been like, you're on something. Like get help. So I get it. I get that sentiment. Um, but here we are. Doing it anyway. So I think I'm going to kind of work backwards through this a little bit because that's just what feels right to me. So one of the things they talked about in this chapter 8, was about common traits. There were 9 common traits that uh, people who have near-death experiences might exhibit or might experience during it. Very, very rarely does anyone have all 9. Um, I believe that this person, Dannion, is probably one of the first people that the researcher Moody, Dr. Moody, had come across. But I'll just give you the quick like highlights. So the first trait was a sense of being dead. So your body is dead. There is a feeling. The second one is feeling of peace and painlessness, in which you find that you're no longer connected to the pain or suffering that was within your body. The third common trait is having an out of body experience. So like you are aware that your spirit is floating away from your body or separating from your body or like hovering above your body. There's number 4 is like the tunnel experience. So if you ever see the whole adage of like going into the light or going in the tunnel or crossing the bridge, like that's commonly reported. Number 5 is seeing people of light. So it could be past loved ones, it could be um, other spiritual guides, a like beings of light. It could be a godlike figure, anything like that. You can get The next one is being greeted by a particular being of light, so typically like a spirit guide that meets you somewhere and they kind of like walk with you as you go to your life review. And so the next one is your life review, which we talked about in the very first, I think it was the very first video that we did, or very first like chat about this that we did, where you get to see pretty much your entire life in review, the pleasant and unpleasant aspects. One of those things being that there's actually a really good quote in here. Hold on. Where did I put it? Second. The life review process. Oh, this is just so good. It was Dannion's words were, "Be careful what you do in life because you have to see yourself do it again when you die. The difference is that this time you are on the receiving end." Letting that land for a second. The the next common trait is feeling a reluctance to return. So once your spirit has kind of passed over this feeling of like, oh, it's you get bathed in light, bathed in love, bathed in like just this pure positive energy, that the idea of coming back into your physical body feels um, undesirable. It's like, why would I go back to the dense energy that is being in a human body when I could just live in all this love and glory? My camera has gone fuzzy. It's fine. We'll keep going. And then the last and final one that they call out is having a personality transformation. So usually after you go through your life review period and or you're getting this information and all these downloads, um and all these downloads, but by the time you come back to yourself, or if you come back to your body, or when you come back to your body, because this is near-death experience, when you come back to your body, it's like your outlook on life has been totally shifted because of the information that you've seen and taken in, uh, which is, I think a good thing. um, but one of the things that they also talked about in this chapter is the topic of death. And this has been something that I've been exploring myself, just with the being a shaman, being able to channel, being able to connect with beings on the other side, is this whole adage about death and like your like where when you die where you go, but like what even is death? And I like how it was defined here. This is on page 76. It says death, for instance, is defined as merely a change from one status or sphere of existence to another. Death is merely a change from one status or sphere of existence to another. And when I first read that, I thought about the death card in tarot that comes up, because a lot of times you get the death card and your first reaction is like, oh my god, you're gonna die, or whatever's dying, and um it becomes more like fear or panic, when really the death card could just mean like a closure, an ending of a situation. And I like that it's like change from one status to another, or sphere of existence to another. Because yeah, I for a very long time I like didn't want to think about death or contemplate death. I think that's probably fairly normal. I think most people don't really want to think about yeah, I think most people don't want to think too much about death, but and I think that's normal. I think that's healthy. And also it brings me a lot of peace to be where I am now, which is a place where it's like I believe in life after death. I believe that our spirits are going places. I mean, I'm a shaman and a channeler for Christ's sake, so I definitely believe in being able to communicate with them, or that they exist. Uh, the collective they exist. So it's like when your body dies, your spirit is still living on. I also believe in reincarnation, so that's another topic or another story. Uh, and so it's just like, where do I want to go with this? I respect death as a human. I respect death and the emotions that come up um, living here as a human and connecting with one another and connecting with other beings. Um, but I also acknowledge that your like when you die, your body is just it's your body that's dying, but your spirit, your essence of who you are is still living on. Um, and so when I think about death, and really what puts death in perspective for me is whenever I think about like my husband. To be honest, it's like I don't really worry about myself dying. I'm like, I'll be fine. like, um, but in like if I think about my loved ones dying, or I think about like my husband dying, I think about and that to me has always been like a signal of like how deep is my love for someone, is like if I think about them dying, how do I feel? And when it comes to my husband, like thinking about him dying makes me it makes me feel really deeply, like I feel very like I I don't want to lose their physical presence, even though I know their like spiritual presence would still be there, or I could still connect to them spiritually. Um, the like physical closeness makes me makes me sad to think about. And so I think that, but I think that's healthy, and I think that's normal. Um, hmm, yeah, and then just like they also call out in this chapter, this kind of building on the topic of death, is that um, I'll just read this for verbatim. They said they believe that upon hold on, who's they? They were talking about like kind of different religions, about like Mormon and Christian beliefs. They're saying like they believe that upon the death of the physical body, the spirit retains the five senses of sight, feeling, taste, hearing, and smell, and they feel that death leaves us free of illness and disability, and that the spirit body can move with great speed, see in many different directions at the same time, and communicate in ways other than speech, and that being more like telepathy. And to be honest, I mean most stories, most things that I've seen and read and watched, and all the things about near death experiences, that seems to track. Yeah, it's true. We very much do have that human desire for closeness and companionship. If there's anything else I wanted to talk about as it pertains to chapter 8. Yeah, the other thing that was kind of coming up about or in chapter 8 was people people having these experiences and not being taken seriously, or when they did share them, um they were either heavily medicated or said like, "Oh, it's the work of the devil," so like they couldn't get any support. And I think that's shifting. I mean, like I said, this happened. This person was going through this in 1975. It's 50 years since then. So, um, and there are now like Netflix documentaries or other documentaries on near the death experiences and mediumship and all that stuff. So I'm like, I think we're getting there, but I don't think it's as like widely as accepted or knowledgeable as it could be. But it does make me like personally sad to think about people being dismissed or coming back and having these like profound experiences and then coming back and people be like, "Oh, that was just a dream," or "That was just a hallucination," or "Here's some drugs," or you know, "You need to be cleansed," and whatever else. It's like I have hopes for the future that is improving and that together we will help one another and be more like kind and compassionate towards one another in kind of waking up to this and waking up to our knowledge of our interconnectedness. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me that I had reached out to a local hospital, a mental health hospital here or locally to see if I could be of service, and I have not heard back. uh, anyway, we continue. Hello, hello. Welcome in. All right. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is, let's see. So, oh, I feel like I probably might need to flag this. Um, it's fine. It's fine. We continue. All right. So the next part I wanted to kind of talk about, we're just kind of working backwards from what I read. Uh, so I'm in chapter 7 now, and we're talking about one person asked this Dannion who, when he came back, all he couldn't stop talking about his experience and what he saw and what his mission was, and he was losing friends as he was doing it because it was just kind of like people are like, this man has gone crazy. Like, to be fair, he was struck by lightning. They thought he was dead for quite some time. I'm like they tried to revive him in the ambulance. They got him to the hospital. Like he went cold. He was outside in the hallway covered with a sheet, like waiting for the morgue to like people from the morgue to come get him when he finally like returned to his body. And then he ended up being, I guess we're kind of jumping back, but he ended up being in his body in the hospital for about like 13 days, and like people were coming and going, and they didn't really think he was gonna make it. Um, so much so that they even sent him home. Whenever they sent him home after about 13 days in the hospital, they sent him home because they were just like, let him die, like spend his last few days at home, like he'll be more comfortable there. It's just it like gives me that reading through this makes me reflect so heavily on like the different family members that I've been around whenever they've passed, because I'm like, I had a grandmother who passed in the hospital, and there was definitely like a silent like we were all around her, and then I remember it was just like a moment of silence, and then she like we could like feel her leave. Um, and so it makes me think about, I don't know, I haven't had a loved one pass away since I've become a shaman and like been near or whatever when been near them since I've become a shaman, but I did have a relative pass away a few months ago that as soon as I learned of their passing, um they came to me and gave me a message to send to, their spouse. They were a distant uncle. I wasn't overly familiar with them or like super familiar with them, but they I got a text that they passed away, and then all of a sudden, because I have office hours on my channel, and so all of a sudden they're like, "Hello, you now are aware of me." Like it was, I learning of their passing allowed them to kind of come into my mind. Um, I was like, okay. um, And I do know I've read other stories too, and have other friends and family that when people will pass away, sometimes like the spirit will, in like a last ditch effort, will kind of do like a apparition or like go like appear by like a loved one like very briefly at the moment or very closely to the moment of their passing. All very good, all very cool things. Just kind of think about. But yeah, love or death is just so fascinating to me, or like the act of death and the what the spirit does when your body's dying, um, is just so fascinating. Because there's also lots of stories and lots of accounts of when people who are they're like getting ready to pass or like they're kind of transitioning, like elderly people often will have reports of saying, oh, like a loved one who has already crossed over is like appearing to them to like help them transition. And so it's so fascinating to learn about. Okay, let me keep going. All right. Talked a little bit about him coming back. We said he was one of the quotes I read that touched me was it says love truly can give life. Love can make the difference. And he thought that um right as his body was coming back to or right as his spirit was coming back to his body, he was like floating over his body. He could sense a loved one, like, or he could see the loved one hanging out by his body, and he could feel the prayers of his family in the waiting room. And he could like feel the prayers, feel the love, and like as he was focusing on that, he felt himself become denser, and then return to his body, and then return to what it was, all of the pain that he was experiencing from being electrocuted by a lightning bolt. Um, and one of the things that he recounts too during this time is because his body was in so much pain and they were doing so many different things to just try to like comfort his pain. They weren't sure if he was going to live. His body was so not discombobulated, but like fried from the inside out. Um, he shared that a lot of the times that he was asleep in the hospital, he was actually returning back to the crystal city that he saw that he had like left and gone to when he had the near death experience, and so he like kept he like kept dreaming and he kept learning and he kept connecting with that space and the light beings. It was just, and so he would like dream for several hours a day or meditate or have these deep visions or have these deep connections uh with these beings. And he's like, awake, the people around me were only waiting for me to die. And he said, asleep, I was being shown how to live a fruitful life. But he had, the thing was, is like, he's like, the pain was so great that I wanted to die, but he knew the truth that he was going to survive. And even when he would go and have these dreams and go into the Crystal City and was like learning about his mission and what he was going to do, um, he viewed coming back to his body as something that he was doomed to live because it was so nice there. And when he returned to his body from being struck by lightning, it was just such a heavy, painful experience. But as he was healing, he was working on, because he was paralyzed. He became paralyzed from this. But he had his brother bring him a copy of like Grey's Anatomy while he's in the hospital, and he started learning about the human body and the different muscles and the different way the body was put together. And like he would spend hours each day looking at the book and then staring at that part of his body, talking to it, says cursing it, trying to make it move, uh, until eventually he was able to like start to begin and get his like sense of movement back. And I put in the edge of the book here like focused intention. And to me, this like this retraining the mind, retraining the body by looking at the anatomy and like talking and is just like he was, to me that's like just like both channeling life force energy as connecting to the light and manifesting, using the power of the mind, using the power of the body to like your body knows how to heal. Sometimes you just need to help it. Sometimes you just need to help it understand how to put itself back together. But your body can put itself back together. Not that you're ever truly broken. It's just, and I think that's super fascinating. I've spent a lot of time in my own healing journey and with all of my health stuff too, doing similarly. I'm very fascinated with every time I was in the doctor's office, I was always super fascinated with all the like anatomical like depictions of the body parts and learning about how they all function, and getting to a place where I feel like my body's operating pretty good now. uh, so one of this guy's missions was when he came back was he's supposed to develop these like centers. Uh, they're like rehabilitation or like wellness centers that were supposed to have like 8 different modalities in there, that are more probably in the more like holistic realm of things. I think there's a combination. I don't remember if I called it out in a previous chapter. Do I have a list? Yeah, okay, so so there was 8 steps, but 7 rooms. So there was supposed to be a therapy room, a massage clinic, a sensory deprivation chamber, a room equipped with biofeedback machines, an area for readings, like psychic readings, a room with beds with like musical components, so like frequency, bed healing, and a reflection chamber. And then the 8th component was supposed to be a process where the person goes back to a room with a bed, and connect to the biofeedback instruments. But it was basically, the purpose was all about having these rooms to help people help show people that they can be in control of their lives through, it says through God, but I like the word love. Me, God, source, spirit, whatever, is just pure positive energy. It's the like energy of love, capital L, love. So I crossed out God and put love. Uh, the good news is that on 13 days after he was struck by lightning, he was able to crawl out of the bed and get into a wheelchair and go home. So that was mostly chapter 6. Now we're going into chapter 7. So he gets home, all the good things. And by say all the good things, I mean he gets home and he doesn't die, he doesn't fully die. Uh, but each night he is, each night he's learning these different lessons. But the thing is, now that he's not fully separated from his body, one of the things that he points out is that when he's meeting up with the beings of light at night, or whenever he's sleeping, um, he's learning the lessons in a much more like struggle way. So like when he had totally left his body and gone to the crystal city, or the city of light, or wherever, the next dimension, the information that he was receiving was just basically like here is everything in image form, like, and or like telepathically told to him. Like he didn't really have to figure anything out. It was just like, here you go. But now that he's kind of back in his body, he's like, each time he's in the night going through, he's having he's like taking classes from the beings of light, but they're not giving him like, this is exactly what you need to do. They're basically being like, here's the end result, like this is what you're supposed to build, and this is how I operate, like this is how the equipment gets operated, and you gotta, like, he has to figure out how to create it on his own. And I circled the word deduction there because it's like learning through struggle and deduction. And I felt like that was really relevant. I felt like the the message, or the idea that we learn and create or co-create through struggle, and having like a balance with our logical mind, and deducing what feels right or what feels wrong or what feels good or what feels bad for us, or more enjoyable. And I also feel like if we were just given the information, like if it was just like, here's all the information you need to know, go, you wouldn't feel a sense of accomplishment. Like you wouldn't be attached to the outcome, or you wouldn't be attached to your goal. You would just be like, oh, well, if I just do this and I do this, like, done. Like, uh, I think that there's there's benefit, and there is a lot of hmm, I think there's the capability or capacity for like a stronger outcome, like internal feeling of joy and accomplishment and reward, if whatever it is you're doing, or whatever it is you're trying to build, or whatever it is, wherever you're trying to go, is not just handed to you, but like you have faced some amount of adversity. Because I'm just like, how, like, life would be so life would be so boring, or would be so uh unfulfilling, if, in my opinion, this is strictly my opinion here, that I feel like life would be really unfulfilling if everything was always handed to me, and that, you know, I didn't have to work for anything. If I just snapped my fingers and everything appeared. Like, I think while there are moments that I'm like, man, I really wish I could just snap my fingers and be at the end, and just like be in the good celebratory like feeling of I've accomplished this. I don't think the feeling of accomplishment would feel as big or as prideful or as like grateful if I just snapped my fingers and it just magically worked. I think there is a lot of I think there's value in adversity. And there's value in a little bit of struggle. I mean, I've found value in all of my struggle at this point, and I've done a lot of struggling in the past. But I do think that there's value in the struggle, and I think there's value in overcoming the struggle and celebrating the life that you have, you get, you experience, you've created because you created it. Like there's a beautiful sense of accomplishment when you know that you've created something. And there was a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears in that creation. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. All right. One of the things that they pointed out, I I highlighted this, which was super fascinating, was it was talking about like one of his dreams he got to see a tour of an operating room in the future. And there was no instruments or anything. It was like the only way they healed was with like a special light. There's just a little fly. Um okay. Focus. All right. Where they just use special lights. So it's like patients are given medication exposed to lights, and the lights change the vibration of cells within the body. They mention how every part of the body has its own vibratory rate. And when that rate changes, certain illnesses take place, but the lights help return the like diseased organs or like the organs that have kind of changed their frequency to like get them back at the right rate that they're supposed to be operating at. And I do remember the first time I started learning about like frequency and vibration, and people started to be like, everything's vibration, everything's frequency, all of, and being like, what the fuck are you talking about? Uh, and also when I did my own like step back from that, and I was like, all right, if I'm hearing it in more than one place, and I'm hearing it across, I started hearing it from I don't know, people I wasn't expecting to hear it from, I guess, or it was like starting to pop up around me. And I was like, all right, I'll do my own research on it. And I kind of went back and I started thinking about like frequency and energy, and went back to thinking about like physics and chemistry. And while I'm not going to give you a full physics and chemistry lesson, I will leave that to you to explore if you wish to. Uh, it was once I started looking at like the physics and how like molecules work, or how, and like remembering that like atoms and everything else, like they're held together but they are vibrating, and that like, and that light, if you look at like the spectrum of light, like we only are able to see a small segment of visible light, but like waves and frequencies and all that, I this is getting really, I don't want to go fully into this like super technical. um Moral of the story is do your own research, but I believe it's true. And to me, I have found enough scientific evidence that everything does vibrate at its own frequency and at its own um yeah, everything vibrates at its own frequency. And so, and that things can be kind of affected, and energy is real. So um while that's a little bit of a trust me, I just said it, do your own research, like come to your own conclusions. But the research that I've done, and having my science background, I'm compelled enough. I'm compelled enough to be like, yeah, yeah, all right, I'm here for it. I can see it. It works. I get it. Uh, Okay. We perceive separation that doesn't exist at a molecular level because our eyes aren't the most evolved part of us. It's wild to imagine. Yes. Imagine what we aren't seeing. Thank you, Retro. Yeah. Yes. That's why I love whenever I'm doing like any sort of energy work with people, I'm often closing my eyes because that heightens my senses, like my physical feeling senses, and I get the visualization of like in my mind's eye of what's happening, but I also feel it in my hands or my body how energy is moving, or even like the energy of a space. Like yesterday after my stream, I took my Palo Santo and I smudged a few areas, but there was only like a very few specific, like when I intentionally tune in, there were only a very few specific areas that I felt called to like smudge or clean, and everything else was like fine. But it was just like there's just certain areas where it's like I can, because I've worked on it, because I've practiced and I've like learned how to work with energy, um, and heighten those senses, I am able to perceive where the density is, or where things need to get moved. Yeah, yeah. I could only imagine if we could see with our eyes, uh, how the waves, like the frequency waves, were 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 moving. Like imagine if we could like step out of time, which time is its own dimensional construct. That's another topic for another story, another day. But like, imagine if you like come out of time and you could just see the waves of everything. Remember, like magic ink mess. Light, smoke, dust sometimes reveal literal patterns our eyes can't perceive without the assistant. I don't know if I'm familiar with magic ink messages, but I what you're saying reminds me of where people will put like sand on a table and then they'll play music either under the table or next to the table, and it will vibrate the table, and then the sand will make a pattern. They'll do that with sand, or you can do that with water, and you can literally see the pattern that's being created from the energy waves, the sound waves. Yeah, yeah. It's cool as shit. Hey. All right. I'm doing wonderful. Let's keep going. So, yeah, yeah. So this next part, I'm just going to read this quote because I just think this is a powerful quote. It says, because this is so to kind of catch you up where we are, we're talking about how he's starting to lose his friends. His friends are thinking that he's talking like a messiah, you know, saying that he sounds like a R word fundamentalist, um, because they've never really heard of anything that's like a near death experience. And he was like, well, in fact, I had never heard of a near death experience, um, as well. And so he said, but I knew there was a great and powerful and glorious God, and I knew that the world on the other side was magnificent. In this world, I was living, breathing, and feeling the pain of the world. I also knew that through love and God, I could work my way out of this pain. And I know when I first read this, I misunderstood the in this world, but it was like separating, on the other side, he understands the city of light to be this magnificent wonder. But then when he came back to his body here, he's like, I'm living, I'm breathing, and I'm feeling all of the pain that this world has to offer. But he also knew that through love, and he says, God, again, I'm through love, I could work my way out of this pain. And I like this where he's like, someone asked him, if it's so great, why don't you just kill yourself? And I remember reading it when I read that. I was like, I think I cried. I cried several times reading this. I'm proud of myself for being able to talk about this right now and not cry. But I was like, damn, that's a valid question. And he reflected, and he shares that, regardless of his condition, even though he was at this point out of the hospital like a zombie, struggling to, get all of his movement back and spending a lot of his days like trying to move and then blacking out because he overextended or overexhausted himself. He's like, regardless of my condition, uh, the experience that he had gave him the inner strength to endure. And so he said, in my worst moments, all I had to do was recall the love that I felt emanating from those heavenly lights, and I could press on. And he goes on to share that, like, to him it didn't make sense to take his own life because he believed in the purpose that he was shown, and he believed in the life review. He believed in seeing his life review and all the good and bad that he did, and he had shared that up until this point, he had done a lot of like harm, a lot of hurt in the world with a lot of the work that he did. I don't know if I shared previously, but he used to work for the government, and I think he used to do some like special ops type stuff. So he in his life review he got to experience basically the blowback of all the pain and suffering he caused, not only the people he harmed, but the families and communities that were affected. But he did go on to say that even when things got bad now, all he had to do was think about like how much love he felt from those beings during that time, and somewhere deep inside of him like things felt better, even if like his physical circumstances weren't instantly improved, like internally he felt better. The good news is he saw an article in a piece of paper or in the newspaper, about, like I said, a Dr. Raymond Moody who was talking on people who have had near death experiences. He was a Georgia psychiatrist, and so he got to go hear one of his talks and meet him. But that is as far as we've made it so far. I'm just checking to see if there's anything else that I wanted to kind of bring into this conversation or space. Yeah, there's one part that I circled, and I'll bring it up, and that's the part about the nine different experiences someone might have whenever they have a near death experience, and it's like this reluctance to return. And he put in his words that he was like, I was forced by the beings of light and given the mission of building the centers to come back. And I circled that and put an X through it. Um, I mean, he doesn't talk about it explicitly, but all of the stuff that I know of about the beings of lights and spirit and all the things is like we do have free will, like we do get to choose. now was everything he was shown, like, did that compel him enough to come back? Yeah, but do I think a being of light was like, no, you're coming back, like, whether you like it or not? I don't think so, but let me. I think he talked about it in a previous chapter. Let me see if I can bring that into this space, because I'm like, I feel like forced is a strong word to put there. I don't know if I agree with it, even though, I mean, it's their words. Yeah, so he shares in a previous chapter, I think this is chapter 5, he's talking about, what the being showed him he was supposed to do. He's supposed to build the centers. Um, that humans with these centers, and when we learn how to reduce our stress, us humans would learn that we're higher spiritual beings, and we'd become less fearful and more loving of one another. Checks out. That's similar to what I've deduced in my own path. Let's see. He related each of those rooms to the ancient oracles of Greece. Okay, so he does say that he resisted his return. He liked the place. He didn't really want to go back, but his says the being of light said, "This we ask of you, you must return to fulfill this mission," said the being of light, and then he came back. To me, that means he got asked and his soul agreed, whether he at least a part of his soul agreed to come back. Maybe the ego part that had been suffering here on Earth was like, no, I don't want to, but there's there was a part of him that wanted to, because that feels, I don't know, that doesn't feel like a force to me. That's just my opinion, based on the words in said book. Okay. All right. That's chapters 6 through 8. How many chapters are even in this? 15. So we're a little over halfway done. Thank you for joining me on my little quest of learning about Saved by the Light. I'm enjoying just kind of coming on and talking about these different things.